Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this November 8th, a Wednesday, 2017 day on our calendar. And what a show I have for you today. I have absolutely nothing to talk about, and that's probably the best kind of show of all, right? You're hit with so much every day. You know, I was thinking about it the other day, and I was driving, and next thing you know, there's another reported mass shooting in a church where over 20 people were killed, an infant up to 18 months. Now, the first thing that goes to the mind of someone that's been watching these shootings is that, did it really happen? And it's really sad when you have to think that way. I mean, if it did happen, it's a sad event. If it's being faked and then just put to the masses to to put fear into them, that's just as bad. And you wonder why every other day in America these mass shootings are taking place. And I guess there's a lot of answers for that. One, you could say there's a lot more crazy people out there who, want to put a gun in their hand and shoot their fellow neighbor in a church. I mean, they're shooting them everywhere. At concerts, schools, churches. Seems to me it's all contrived. It's all orchestrated, just like they orchestrate wars. And when you start thinking in those terms, you start really dissecting what they do. And it seems like now it's escalating, right? Every other week used to be, every month? Then it gets every other week. Then now it seems like every 2 or 3 days. And if it's not here, it'll be in a place in Europe. If it's not in Europe, then it's in one of our allies in Asia. And it seems to be an orchestrated effort to basically lock down the world and create the Vatican-led New World Order, one world religion. And people have asked me over the years, can you define what that is? And I said, of course, it's very simple. If you think back of the old Roman Empire, and the goals of the Roman Empire was to control as much of the world as they could. When the Roman Empire fell and basically morphed into the Vatican's role became a little bit more subtle, call it, a little bit more deceptive. They were fronting themselves as a church, but yet over the years, Rome has still become the center of power. And it's a more devious occult power today that takes on different roles in different countries. And for some reason, people can't get it into their heads that you've got to figure out who the puppet masters are. Now, a lot of times on this show, we talk tongue-in-cheek about it. We create a lot of sarcastic views. We have a little fun with it. We joke around a little bit. We may create fictional realities, I call it. But what it boils down to is most people are not prepared for what is about to happen. And then people email me and say, Greg, how are you so sure something's going to happen? And I said, well, when you look into it over the years, there's always a buildup. There's always, you see, the same things we were talking about 10 years ago, we're talking about today. But there seems to be an escalation of the orchestrated wars, the orchestrated terrorism. I remember 20 or 30 years ago, the terrorism was basically not in this country, but yet in Europe, and people couldn't get their hands around it, that the European leaders are also puppets of the Vatican-led New World Order. And they work side by side with the American leaders, the Asian leaders, etc. And 30 years ago, terrorism was regional. was especially in Italy, where I saw it firsthand. It was a regional effort where there was this strategy of tension, and they were testing how they could maybe orchestrate these terror groups, how they could put fear into the minds and hearts and souls of the masses. And they did it in many, many different ways in Italy and other European countries during those times. And as it moved forward, now it's global. And along came ISIS, along came Al-Qaeda, you name it. There's more terror groups out there than you can shake a stick at. And all for the same goal. But it's not only that. There is a systematic orchestration of most everything in your life. For example, when you start thinking about clean air, clean water, we fail to understand that they're organizing a campaign to basically poison you. And they've done it since the 90s with chemtrails. And every time people start getting a little bit of a handle on it, they come up with a mainstream article like going on right now that states that people who believe in chemtrails are crazy, and then they create a scenario of how it's only contrails from airliners and these conspiracy theorists. I mean, they did it with 9/11. They'll do it in the financial circles. They'll do it in most everything you do. And the craziest thing what's going on now is the Satanism that is behind all of this, controlled by the puppet masters in the Vatican and the Jesuit order and others who are falling lockstep with them. You see it so blatantly now. It's right in your face in most everything you do. It's in the symbols even on cars. It's in the symbols in Hollywood. You're seeing this orchestration of decadence all over. You're seeing the Vatican fall to pieces. Just read, there's an article now that a high-level priest came out and said that he had a vision that Pope Francis was the Antichrist. And they're dividing the Vatican so that it can topple. Because every time you want to topple something, you have to create tension within. And you're seeing that happen in the United States government. So they're doing it in politics. They have to break down this country. And they have to break down Catholicism to create a new religion. The one that will be the false Messiah coming forward to get rid of these so-called decadent people. But in a sense, these people creating this false Messiah so that they can even create more decadence in the future. And people are going to fall into it lockstep. And you won't believe it when you see it. Now, I don't know how old you are. If you're a baby boomer, maybe you're not going to see it in reality. But you're seeing the final steps leading to it maybe in the next, 30 years? Could be even sooner. I was saying before Trump is out of office, there will be a huge conflict. Now, I can't say what it's going to be. I can't say whether it's going to be something that they orchestrate in weather, with the weather manipulation and orchestration of perhaps creating a catastrophic event that disrupts America. I can't tell you whether it's going to be some type of EMP attack from a foreign country controlled by the Jesuits. And, Trump knows what's going to happen. He's got the scenario. They got a playbook. It's like a, plan A, plan B, plan C playbook. Just like you'd do if you were on a football team. And they give it to the quarterback and say, hey, okay, this is what we want to do. This is how we're going to operate it. We got this going in the left side of the world. We got this going on the right side of the world. And this is how we're going to orchestrate everything. And this is our game plan. And it's going to happen within this certain period of time, depending on how things work out in the game. Now, if you ever played a football game, it always doesn't go as planned. And so you can't really put your finger and say, okay, on October 31st or on November 30th, 2017, there's going to be a war between North Korea and the United States. I can't do that. But you can also see how it's building to something big. And if they're spending all this money on these nuclear weapons now and building up all these militaries, they want to use it. They're not just doing it for fun. And who's going to be the winner and who's the loser? Well, there is no winner or loser in these wars. The winners are always, if we want to say, the people lose. No matter if you're a North Korean or whether you're living in the Bible Belt in America, These are the people, the innocent people, always suffer from these kind of orchestrated wars, and it won't be any different now. So what happened was, everybody's always wondering what it's going to be like when the United States falls. And how can it fall? You see, we got to look at this. There's a lot of self-interest going on in this whole thing, and there's a lot of money flowing. I mean, you're talking about, if you wipe out, as some people say, you go from 350 million people to 60 million by 20. Some people are saying 2025. That's on some of these COINTEL websites, whether they're there to scare you or whether that's information they want to put out to let you know what's happening, which they have to do in their own cryptic way. It would really devastate a lot of things. There wouldn't be enough football players to pick from. The NFL would suffer. The baseball, well, they'd have to bring in more Chinese players, so the whole game of baseball would shift to, the minority would be white Americans playing baseball. And all these things, and you think, oh, Greg, now you're being tongue-in-cheek. No, I mean, where are they going to draw people? They wouldn't have enough people to go to the games. They ain't going to have enough revenue to, it's the masses of people that bring revenue to television. It's the masses of people that bring revenue. So what is it going to be like? I don't think they're just going to sit down and say, we're going to let America be 64 million Americans. No, they're going to bring people from all these foreign countries, and Americans will become like the remaining of them will be like second-class citizens in their own country, but it won't be their country anymore. So that way, the powers that be will separate organize the world in a sense where they'll have total control over it. Easier to control 4 or 5 segments than it is to control 250, 300 countries. How many ever countries there are in the world with all different languages and different philosophies. How can you control that? The people might benefit in these countries, correct? So what you have is this whole speculation of how could they do this? Well, you're seeing it piece by piece by piece. You see, they have enough control over Americans now to do whatever they want. Everybody's, all they're talking about now, all these sexual scandals in Hollywood, in the Vatican, it goes on, in Washington. You're hearing about it in the state houses. Every other day there's 10 accusations of sexual harassment to, rape against women. I mean, this thing, I've never seen so much of this go on. And could that be orchestrated as well? I mean, listen. It's just weird to me. I can't put my finger on it. Maybe you can, but it appears that every aspect of life we talk about, there's always something, there's going to be a hidden agenda behind what's actually being reported and what is really happening behind the scenes. Now, I take a look at kind of the Vatican, Jesuits, and the United States leaders, and I try to speculate exactly what they're thinking and where they're going to strike next. And a lot of times, I get this gut feeling that there's got to be something big on the horizon. And I never felt that way before, because if you go back to some of my other shows, you'll see that I would never be this outspoken about an event that I can't predict, but I feel, if you can gather what I mean. And then I start thinking about all the people that just don't get it. And if they don't get it, then they're going to just be blindsided by whatever happens, not really understand why, where, or who, or how. And they'll always blame the wrong people, and they'll be the worst for the whole affair, right? Then I listen to all these, who in our society takes the lead on most every issue. It's usually the top Illuminati, Vatican-led politicians. it's usually the top entertainers, the top sports figures, all acting as if what we talk about in this show is just fiction. I mean, I was listening to a conversation between Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, and they touched on politics, and they acted as if they really believe that there's a left and a right scenario here, and that we really have enemies, and none of them would ever dare to take that one step over the fence and talk the truth. Now, it's hard for me to believe that somebody with that kind of money and that kind of power and that kind of time wouldn't have interest in getting to the bottom of things. Now, maybe they did, and they know that what they're saying is a lie, but they can't say it because they know they would never make a film again. Well, both of them have made so many films, why do they need to make any more? I mean, are they going to just, mislead people the rest of their lives? Yes. Now, I'm not taking away anything from their acting ability. And, I go to their movies because I like their style. But it's hard for me now to justify even doing that. It's hard for me to justify ever going to an NFL game again, because the way they are orchestrating this hatred between the hatred of American people who love this country, and then they're dividing those who want to create all these people that don't stand for the national anthem. Listen, you may not believe in America, but it's one thing for these football players to, Colin Kaepernick for one, to be, I believe, in the Jesuit payroll behind the scenes as the first to start this whole thing, because it's right out in front of the public. But what does it really do? They have a lot of voice, and it divides the people. Secondly, it then will have a trickle effect with advertisers creating friction there between two sides, and they want to control both sides. And so this is how they do it. They use high-level football players, high-level basketball players, high-level sports figures, high-level Hollywood figures, high-level politicians to lead this charge of division. When, in fact, if somebody on the street would say, they have some problems with the United States, I mean, of course, we all do. Like I talked about on my show yesterday. I did a whole show on just crazy problems. And got a couple emails about it saying, Greg, you sound like you have trouble solving the littlest thing. Yes, sometimes I have trouble tying my shoes. But anyway, go to that show. You might find that there's a lot of truth to, when you live in a society that becomes really disheveled at the top, it always seeps down to the bottom. And all these little problems that technology take away from your really living. I mean, how many hours do you spend doing these kinds of mindless things, but you can't function in the world anymore? You're an outsider. And I talked about that yesterday. You become almost controlled by technology, controlled by the way we communicate. We have no communication unless it's technological now, in a sense. And then maybe the only other communication we have with people is when we get into little squabbles. We get, our neighbor decides that your bush on the left side of the house is infringing upon his territory, and there becomes an argument that lasts for years. And what about that thing that happened with Rand Paul? Now, I don't think, could that have been orchestrated? Apparently, him and his neighbor, who was a Democrat and Rand's a Republican, if they both, I think Rand Paul understands what the story is, but maybe his neighbor didn't. They're all controlled, the Democrats and the Republicans. But apparently they had a land dispute over a boundary line on their property, and he decided to tackle Rand from the backside while he was mowing his lawn, and supposedly Rand now has 5 broken ribs and a bruised collarbone or something. and is in a lot of pain. Now, if his ribs are broken, I can attest that 5 broken ribs are going to really hurt. I remember once I was working on my boat, and I hit a beam when I was under in the bilge, and that was a big stand-up beam and a pretty big boat. And I landed right on that beam on my ribs and broke 2 ribs. And I'll tell you what, that was one of the most painful times. You cough and you start crying. I swear. So Rand Paul, hopefully, even though I disagree with your politics, not that you're a Republican, I disagree with all of them, I know the pain you're going through. So here we go, trying to figure out what is going to happen. When American, how can it happen? There's so many things going on. Would it be just a complete crash like that overnight? And then everything changes? What about, I always think about, what are the rich people going to do? I guess the ones that know about it will have their money invested somewhere else, and they don't care whether they're in China or, I mean, there's a lot of probably opportunities there, right? Or maybe they want to bring China here. Or they want to destabilize everything and create, like I said, what I think is the most feasible is that they have to get rid of they have to get rid of sovereign nations and bring them to their knees so they can rebuild them in the New World Order fashion. And that's happening in Europe very quickly with the migration there of disrupting any type of Italian life, French life, Norwegian life, you know what I'm talking about, and they're doing the same thing in America, so that everything becomes discombobulated and there's no divisions between race, so to speak. I mean, when you go into Italy in the future, it's not going to be like, oh, I'm going to see the Italians. It'll be the country that was. And the same with America. What was America like back in 1950? What was America like? What was it? Because it isn't America anymore. That's what I think will be like 30 to 40 years from now. And then the young people will start being old people, and they'll remember a little bit of what it was like, and when they're gone, it'll just be in the history books rewritten by the Jesuits. And it'll be some false story, and there'll always be somebody that'll bring a little bit of truth to it, but they will be marginalized. And it'll go on like that forever till there is no forever. And such will be the case, but we still speculate, what is it going to look like? How are they going to really do this? You know, that's the real interesting thing. And the more questions, if you think you have all the answers, then there's really no reason to listen to any radio show or talk about these things, because you know it all. But I have 100 million questions all the time that can never seem to be answered. And so I continue to talk about it, speculate about it. And the one interesting thing about it is I took it into my own hands and decided to go into the future. People don't believe me. And I'll get into that in the second half of the show, with my own little time-traveling machine that you've heard about for the last few shows. So I thought I'd take a sneak peek and see if I could get there and let you know exactly what life, well, from what I can see, I can only stay, I found out now, at least 60 minutes or so. Or I may end up in the future or the past forever, because my machine is very archaic. So I'll give you best what I could see in that time. Back in 3 minutes on, you know the name of the show, so you say it, Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the Scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal on this November 8th, 2017 day on our calendar. And, you know, that was one of the strangest things that ever happened to me. That day I did that story about Nikola Tesla's time travel methods. And then I decided to experiment on my own. And it worked. And ever since then, I take these little trips. Like when it first started, I went back to 1947, and then I shot back here to 2017, then I went back to 1961 and was going to be there for the Kennedy assassination, but I had to come back, so now I'm planning to go back to that. And people email me and go, Greg, we know it's not true. Why do you keep talking like that? And I said, well, it's a lot truer than a lot of the things you see on the internet, and people believe it. Planet X, aliens, big tall white people from another country, tall whites, the little grays, NASA. You believe everything you hear from NASA and all of their computer-generated images of what they've created, the universe, all of these planets that don't exist, and all of these things, satellites that travel, thousands of them that just never seem to hit each other. And they look so flimsy. And so people believe in the United States government is actually working for them. They believe the Jesuit order is a great group of educators. They believe that wars are the product of terrible regimes that hate freedom. Now, on the surface, that's what they are, but they're controlled from behind for a reason. So I said, if people believe all that stuff, why shouldn't they believe that I actually created a machine that goes back and forth in time, just like Tesla was working on, and then you've seen it in the movies, so it has to be true, right? You've seen the time machine movies. But I did it just, I didn't have much money, but I figured out a way to do it, and I told you how. Go back and you can look at my shows, because I don't want to give away my secrets of the gym shoes and the type of tinfoil you use and how you hook up the wires and how you got to get that electrical current supercharged. I can't give away all my secrets. But anyway, I had some nice, what I do is when I go there, I take my little video or my little machine and I basically tape. I can only stay for an hour, I found out. Otherwise, I may disintegrate and end up there forever. So I got to get out. I got a good timer, and I usually start revving up the engine about 3 minutes before. And I get the hell back to 2017 and to do the show. So last night, I decided to see. I never went forward. I always went back because I figured, well, at least I know what happened behind, ahead of, behind. At least I know a little bit about history. But I never really decided to go forward, and I found out you have to reverse the polarity to get forward. So that's what I did, and then people said, well, how do you set it for a certain date? I said, well, that's the secrets of tinfoil and these the machine that I created. But I can actually gauge within about 3 or 4, 5 working days when I want to go and when I want to come back. Okay? People say, well, what do you miss when you return? Is it the same time that when you left? I said, well, it's about the same time. Maybe a little bit of time goes by, but not much. I think about 25 seconds. So I can actually spend an hour either forward or backward in time and come back and lose only 25 seconds. Now, where that 25 seconds goes, I have no idea. But that's about the best I can calculate. So I decided last night, and as you can see, I'm back. So I got back safely, so I won't leave you in suspense. And I decided to fly to 2060. That's what? 40 years from now? Not too far away. And I got there, and it was in the springtime, because I didn't want to land in the middle of Fargo during winter, wearing clothes that would not be suitable for that climate. So I decided to land in the spring. And now I'm going to put on a tape that I played, that I did while I was there, and I'll play parts of it because I think I taped about an hour, well, actually 9 minutes, because I had to get back. And this is what I saw. Now, don't be overly shocked, or don't be overly looking at this as like, oh, he's going to come up. I'm going to tell you right now, I didn't see much that I could really startle people with, because I wanted to be truthful about it. So here's what I did when I first got out of my little go-kart time machine. Okay, run the tape. Okay, here we are. I'm Jackie and Jill. My 2 little puppies are here. And we're just getting out. It's early morning. I can see the sun coming up. I guess it's from the east. I'm looking at a mountain on the one side, so I'm trying to place where I'm at. Jackie and Jill, you have any idea? I got to let these dogs out to go take a pee. Come on, Jackie, go ahead. They're looking at me rather strange. And they're not going very much farther. Go ahead and take a pee. Where are you? Where are you? They hear other dogs in the distance, so there are people. Yes, they are. I hear them. Now, okay, they're peeing. And I see a lot. I'm walking on what appears to be, I don't know, it's not like grass anymore. It's like everything looks dark. And above me, it looks rather dark. Now, it's not that cold, but it's morning, springtime, but it is a bit chilly. I brought a little sweater, and now I'm walking away from the go-kart, and I hear dogs in the distance, and I'm looking, but things don't look the same as the way it was when I remember America. Things are so dark. The ground it almost looks like molten lava I'm walking on or something. And I'm just going to keep walking. And see what I find. Okay, let me cut the tape here because now what happens is I have to walk for about 20 minutes. Okay, so I'm not going to get much. And I taped a whole bunch of stuff when I was walking, but I didn't see much. I'm going closer to those mountains. And I was thinking that perhaps I was right on, if you've ever driven from the east coast to the west coast, you run into the Rockies. And maybe I was coming out of the plains, and I'm right at that place where the mountains start. Because that's what it reminded me of, but I couldn't be sure because things didn't look the same. I didn't see any towns. I saw roads that were roads and signs that were all broken down. And there wasn't much animal life. I know I heard some dogs and pack dogs in the distance. And so I marked my route so I could get back real quick. And I wasn't going to stray too far because I could see where my go-kart was. And I didn't want to go too far because I had to go 20 minutes and then 20 minutes back. So I think I even cut it short because I want to play the second part of this tape. Okay, we've been walking now for about 12 minutes. I've got to keep close eye on it. Things are looking crazy. I mean, I've never seen a landscape like this. It looks like the mountains are all covered over with something. I hear some dogs, but nothing else. I don't see any birds. There usually are birds. It's very silent. And this is the point where I look in the distance. Yes, I see a little bit of a campfire. Okay, let me go a little bit farther. Okay, I cut the tape there because I remember I went a little closer, and guess what happens? Okay. Oh, no. I'm friendly. And these are my two little dogs. And guess what? Do you speak English? They didn't talk to me. They're not speaking to me. And I'm gonna have to break it now. I'm gonna have to break it right now. I'll be back in a second. I'll be back. Everything cut off there. I had no communication whatsoever. I lost my recordings. That recording I kept, but I couldn't make any longer. It seemed like there was some kind of, I don't know, it was like a power outage. But there was no power. The only power I had was my little recorder. But it wasn't working. So I have to tell you what went on. There were 3 people. Looked like a man and a woman and a younger boy. And they looked, I knew they were Caucasian, but their hair was disheveled. They looked like they hadn't taken a bath in years. And the boy, he seemed like he couldn't really, and the dogs, yeah, they're back with me, and they're happy to be back. Because, boy, that family, and it turned out to be a family, and they told me, they spoke English, But they were almost like in shell shock. And they didn't look too... they asked me, what was that in my hand? I said, it's a tape recorder. They kind of remember what that was. Then I said, have you ever seen one of these? And they said, a cell phone. Oh, we remember cell phones. I said, you don't have them anymore? They said, no. And I said, oh, what happened? How long have you been here? And apparently the story was just amazing. They said that they were about 20 to about 30 years ago. This big, just catastrophic event occurred. They couldn't tell what it was. It came from all areas. Everything turned black. There was no power. And then, as things started to disintegrate around them, they had built a shelter. They were one of the few people that believed that something was going to happen. And they were one of the few people, they said, that survived, because when they came out of it, they said it was like nothing they've ever seen. There was no electric, there was nothing. And they've survived for 20 years. But I said, well, how come you're not over, on the other side of the mountains there? And they said, well, that's where Denver used to be. But they're rebuilding it. And I said, who's rebuilding it? He said, you don't want to go there. Because if they find you, and especially if you're white and you're American, you'll end up in a slave camp. And it's all these different looking people. They're from all over the place. They're all wearing certain different uniforms, but they've come. And I said, well, what is the government like? There is no government. We haven't heard anything in years. I said, how have you survived? And they said, by the grace of God. And we've gone from cave to little shelters. We've stayed away. We've one of the lucky ones. If they see you, they'll pull you in. I said, well, what's over... If I go that way, they said, there's no mass communication right now. There's no things going back and forth. There's no trains. There's nothing. I said, well, what happened? They said, we don't know. It just was like a cataclysm. It was like it just happened. We can't even explain it, but we're here. And I said, who's the boy? And they said, we don't know. We picked him up along the way. And so what happened was I couldn't talk to them any longer. And I had to get back to my little machine. So I went back, luckily got there within 3 minutes of never getting back, probably, because of the polarity and the currents and whatever I was experimenting with. And ended up getting in my little go-kart and coming right back and losing about 25 seconds. So here I am, and all I could tell you is that's what I saw in that short period of time. I can't tell you anything else. I can't say that the world is in a worse position. It was to those people, but maybe it was just in that area. Maybe there was so much more on the East Coast we never saw, or up in the mountains, over those mountains. I didn't go down south. I don't know what's happening around Miami. I don't even know where the coasts are anymore because they didn't know. Boy, I've got to learn how to set this thing so I can set it to certain areas. But what if I set it for Miami and there is no Miami? But I can only stay an hour now. I've got to perfect this thing so I can stay longer. Maybe go farther into the future where where I can talk to somebody that knows what happened. My God, this is opening up a whole new world. I might not even have to worry about the world I'm in. Like I got back in the last day, I haven't been worried about these little problems at all that I had. I could care less about cell phones. I could care less about TV. I could care less about all this stuff because it's not going to be there anymore. And it's only here to pacify me now. But isn't it important to learn what's going to happen, to learn what happened in the past, to try to prevent it from happening in the future so that a family like this that I met for that short, brief time, how many more are there? And how many didn't make that cataclysmic event they saw? It said it was like blackness coming right over them. And then they couldn't hardly breathe. The air was so bad, the toxins. They said they looked out and they could hardly see anything. It was like the scariest thing in the world. But that's what you can learn in a short period of time, just by being able to look back into the past, use what you have in the present, and then go into the future to know what's going to really happen. And there I proved it. Now I know there's going to be naysayers. that say, Greg, it's impossible. I said, isn't it impossible that the earth is round? And isn't it impossible that people can actually believe what NASA has to say? And isn't it crazy that they can believe what their government tells them and then they do it? Isn't it crazy that they believe every word that comes out of the Jesuits' mouth and they don't believe in the deceptions? Isn't it crazy? But it can't be any crazier than what I just said and what I just did. So, what is true and what isn't true? Isn't what's true what's really in your mind? Isn't what's true really what you believe, even though you don't have any facts to back it up at all? If I went long enough and talked long enough like this, I'd believe even what I'm saying. And I do believe it because I know it happened. Now, does it happen just in your mind? Is that enough to make you believe something? Or do you have to actually see it, touch it, and feel it? Well, many people believe in God without ever touching, seeing, and feeling. Right? So, what is the truth? Where does it come from? Is it a feeling? Is it based only on fact? How do you come up with this kind of stuff? Who do you believe? Who don't you believe? What story in history do you believe? What religion do you believe? What faith is the true faith? And how does that work out with the rest of the world if they don't believe so? I mean, who is right and who is wrong when they say there was a terrorist event and 27 people were killed in this church in Texas, and let's say that they weren't killed, but it was just a fake event. Well, in the minds of all these people in America that believe it's true, then it's true because they believe it to be true. And if you can get enough people to believe that the American government is on your side, then it's true to these people, and nothing is going to change their minds. Now, how do you get people to wake up to the one world order, this government, this thing I saw into the future happening? How do you get them to wake up? That, folks, is a $1 million question. And the thing is, you can't. You must allow a person to grovel in his own ignorance. Even though things can be presented to him, he will not see. Because his belief systems have taken over so badly, so strongly, that not one thing can enter his mind, body, or soul that doesn't agree with what he feels or she feels. And that's the kind of narrative, that's the kind of propaganda that the Vatican-led New World Order wants to put out there so that people cannot get out of the beast. People can't get out of the matrix because they can't get out of their own mindset. They can't get out of their own soul set. They can't get out of their own body set. Everything is controlled. They've got it all figured out with the help of people who are manipulating everything about their mind, body, and soul. And so, by studying the past, by living in the present, looking at it for what it is, and then by popping into the future, as fortunate as I was to do it, you have a tendency to want to reveal this to people so that you can help them understand you must get out of the beast. If you don't, then everything that you were born to be free, born to think by yourself, born to create what is to be the reality that this world really is, not what they present to you. And you have all of the abilities to do that, but you're blinded by your own belief systems that have been put there for a reason to block you from the truth, to block you from ever finding a Savior, to block you from ever finding freedom and truth and love. And you'll never get there I always have this picture on my computer that has a runner on the ocean. And I look out and I see so many things. The person running away from the truth. I look in the horizon and I see nothing but a flat earth. I look at the beautiful water and I see how it's been polluted where even the fish can't swim in it anymore. I see the clouds above and then I see those rotten chemtrails. Even though the picture doesn't show them, I see them anyway. And it reminds me how it could be, but how it isn't. And that one little trip I took, just for 1 hour. And I'm frightened to go forward again. I may not go again. Because I don't know what I'll find if I go to 2080, 2100, 2150, 22. I might be too frightened I might be frightened out of my socks and never get back. And that, I don't want to do that. As bad as it is here, I don't want to be stuck somewhere where I'm even more out of place, if you know what I mean. Well, anyway, take it for what it's worth. Come back to the Investigative Journal. You always have a home here to sit and ponder the truths of life, why we're here. Not afraid to delve into the Vatican-led New World Order for what it really is. And to do it without fear, without worrying, and without saying to yourself, there's no hope. Because there is hope. There's hope in just understanding all of this stuff. And once you understand that, there's even more hope. Because you realize what lies ahead really for you. If you're willing to step away, step out of the beast, and find a new way to live. And let me tell you something. That's scary in that little go-kart when you start. People say, well, what happens between the time you leave and the time you come? I don't know. It's kind of weird. You're kind of like there and you're not there. And it's kind of like that. You ever remember what it's like when you're just about to fall asleep and you're thinking and it's like all confused and you're not sleeping, and that's what it's like. But anyway, maybe I'll take some more trips and we'll talk about it some more on the Investigative Journal. But come back tomorrow on Thursday. Have a good evening. And thanks for listening, and I'll see you tomorrow in 2017.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.